Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end of life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome to another episode. One of the greatest gifts we can give our families is to clearly document the important stuff: wills, accounts, passwords, healthcare wishes, even funeral plans, and to make sure our loved ones know where to find it. Because when someone dies, the last thing we want is for our family to be running around trying to track down utility accounts or bank details or wondering what to do with a social media profile. What we really want is for them to have the space to be together, to grieve, to remember, to just be. Today's conversation is all about that kind of thoughtful preparation. My guest is Farah Baxter, the co founder of Soalma, a platform designed to help people store the important details of their lives in a way that's simple, secure, and deeply human. Whether you've never thought about end of life planning before or you've started but don't know what's missing, this episode is here to guide you gently and practically. So grab a warm drink, find a comfortable seat, and join us for the conversation. Farah, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with your story. What brought you to co-create Soma?
Yeah. So, actually, for both of us, me and my co-founder, it was an experience that we both lived. When people from our respective families passed away, we felt firsthand the stress, the frustration uh, that people experience, and that's not isolated. In fact, the majority of people go through this sort of experience due to lack of planning. And when we met, we were both working on similar ideas in the space, and that's when we decided to join forces. His idea was more on the emotional side, giving advice, family history, things like that. And for me, it was a practical problem, right? When my someone from my family passed away, my mom and I just didn't know where anything was, right? Paperwork, bank accounts, all of those practical planning items. And today at Solma, we've brought both of those components hand in hand into what we've built.
Yeah. Yeah, when I work with people, the first thing I do is assess, if they're at that stage, if they're not too ill, we assess, hey, where is everything? We make sure that's documented also, because it's true. People do not realize after how much time, if you don't document it and have everything available, how much time it's going to take their loved ones. We're talking
Absolutely.
weeks, weeks upon weeks of work. And yeah, so it is a gift.
It it's time taken away from the things that matter most. It's exactly what you said. It's either grieving a loss, celebrating a life, or doing whatever you as an individual need to do to get through that moment.
Yeah. I remember when I started doing this work, I was talking to a coworker and he said, um, my mom just passed away and you would not believe credit cards, utility bills. He had to take off work to do this to help, and yeah, so it's people just don't realize. So thank you for being here. And I know that many people avoid this kind of planning because it's scary and they don't think about it, or they do, they wait and it's too late. Why do you think that is? And how do you think that we can begin to shift that mindset so that people do start planning more?
Well, it's interesting that you said avoid, right? Because I think there are two things to tackle here. The first one, like you rightly said, is people avoid the planning. And then they're left in a bind when something happens. And that can be driven by a number of different factors. Either they think they're too young, they're too healthy, maybe it's a subject that's taboo in their family or their culture, or maybe it's just something too painful to face. But there's a second group, and that group doesn't avoid it entirely. They actually do plan for it. They've created a will, they might have bought life insurance, but they don't dive into that topic much more. And there's so many more things to be planned for. And so, obviously, we need to tackle both those challenges. The second group is much easier. right? It's supporting the people who've already started this planning journey in their existing journey and showing them how to manage all those other things. And that's what we're doing right now by focusing on estate lawyers, life insurance, financial advisors, retirement homes, to name many, right? And even for this group, they tend to kick the can down the road due to lack of time, lack of mental space to do it in that moment. And we acknowledge that planning can be complex and can be time consuming. But we always say that something is better than nothing. And then moving back to that first group that you said, they're the ones that want to avoid the subject. And that's going to be a little bit trickier. But I really do believe that this type of planning will become more normalized in society. It will become what people do. And in fact, I think digital tools like ours will help take away some of that challenge that people face, especially doing it face to face with someone that they love. But at the end of the day, that the second group would avoid it completely. It's going to take a village, right? It's not just me, it's not just you. It's going to take a lot of people, and society will change. But I'm very, very confident that that will happen. And when we think about certain other topics like seatbelts, smoking, or getting in a car with a stranger, there was a time not too far back when the way we approach these topics or our mindset on them was entirely different. And I really believe that that will be the same for legacy planning. So it's starting with the people who've already started planning, and then slowly we'll get to the people who are avoiding the topic a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, yeah, I remember, like you said, it is a different thought process, kind of like when the seatbelts, I remember not wearing a seatbelt. And then all of the commercials and all the media to wear seatbelts because in the United States, it became law that you had to. And it was, it, it was an effort. It really was, but it was a large effort and it became really mainstream. And so, yes, like you, I am seeing it become more and more news articles. I read, you go on the ARP site and they're talking a lot now about this type of stuff. Um, but again, it is for people who are older. And I think that everyone should be thinking about it. I'm in my 50s, but I started thinking about this in my 40s and preparing for
Absolutely.
this. And I'm not sick. I'm not, so it was something that I just knew that I had to do. Um, Whereas my parents, on the other hand, they're in their 80s and just the will, like you said, they're part of that second group where the will, they went through it with us. And then at that point, we're like, okay, where are the utility bills? Where are your credit cards? My dad, I was visiting them. They live in Chicago. Very cute. My parents are amazing. But my dad, he took on a little legal pad and he wrote everything down in his chicken scratch, right? And then made a photocopy of it. He has a copier at home and handed us, like sent us it in the mail, a copy of this. But um, yeah, it's a really tough and interesting conversation to have, but very needed. And I'm glad that it'll make our life much easier and my mom's life.
Absolutely.
If my
Yeah.
dad dies before my mom, sorry, mom, um, she will have all of this stuff. She'll know how to pay the bills. She'll know how to get into the utilities because of what my dad documented.
Absolutely. And to your point right now where you said it used to be, or in some ways still is, more geared to an older crowd, that's changing. Younger people have more complicated lives. They move more often. They might have different properties in different countries, even. And they're already getting ahead of this. They are creating Excel lists or files on computers on where everything is, and they're not waiting to get older or get sick to do it. It's just something that's intrinsic to who they are when they're young and when they're healthy.
What do you say to people who do feel that they're too young to be thinking, like, what is the right age? Yeah, someone asked me, "What is the right age to have an advanced directive?" as an example, and I said, "Well, the right age to start speaking about it is when your child gets their license and they're having that conversation about donating their organs because there's a little check mark that they have to. That's a great introduction to having a larger conversation. And then when they're 18, I know it seems insane to some people, but let's say they're in college. You're not there. It just makes life easier because of HIPAA laws. It doesn't matter, you're their parent, yes, and while most doctors would, give you all the information, because of HIPAA laws, it's getting more and more difficult. So
Yeah.
to have someone called out as a POA, healthcare proxy is important. So, like, to me, I'm like, when you're 18, you should start thinking about this type of stuff. And I know 18 for most people is too young. They don't have the utilities or anything, but to me, it's you're moving out on your own, you have utility, start documenting everything. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think the earlier you do it, the easier it is, right? When you're older, if you're diagnosed with some sort of medical ailment, then it's sad. Then it's right around the corner potentially. But if you do it when you're, even 18, right? With, like you said, most people might say it's a little early. Or even in your 20s, 30s, I know many people when they have kids or they buy property, this is a key driver. The earlier you do it, the better. And, we were talking about, well, I'm too young or I'm too healthy. I always prompt people to say, well, what's the alternative? When you're old and sickly, you pick, right? And actually, I was having a conversation with someone recently, and they said, you can plan vertically or you can plan horizontally. And it took me a second to really understand what the point was. But basically, you can plan while you're alive or you don't plan and then someone else is going to make those decisions after you're gone, right? So the decision is yours, but always as early on is really better.
So both you and I have worked with families. Some of them have been prepared and have done this work, and some haven't. Have you seen or of course we've seen, but let's talk about the emotional impact of having or not having all of this documented, not only for the person who's, let's pretend a person is sick, or but for their family also. Since you've seen it, can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. Well, when I was talking about how my co-founder and I really came into this topic, he had experienced more of an emotional gap and mine was more practical. But either way, it's an emotional experience, right? Planning is emotional, not only for ourselves in that planning process, but for the people we leave behind. And there is nothing we can do to avoid that, right? To get rid of the pain completely associated with that loss, I can't promise that. But what we can do is minimize the gap, right? By planning. This situation is arguably one of the hardest an individual might face. So, how can you or how can we help them feel a little bit better? And for those that are prepared, even in a small, minor way, their families are saving time, money, um, they're minimizing stress, and they're able to focus on what's important, which is what we mentioned earlier, grieving a loss, celebrating a life. And uh, for many people, you can't minimize that gap, but you can focus on what's important. Um, and from the emotional side, that can be, hearing a person's voice one more time. It gives them a sense of peace on something that might be missing otherwise. And on the practical side, it's just saving them time. When you don't plan, you are left with a roller coaster of emotions that you have to deal with. So many different factors that you're ill prepared to handle in that moment. And the difference between planning and not planning is night and day.
Yeah, I agree. before I came into this work, I didn't, of course, I will, yes, medical, advance directive I knew about, but the nitty gritty of documenting everything was off my radar.
Absolutely.
People just don't think about it.
Most people think of assets or they think of legal documents, but something as simple as how do you pay the electric bill at grandma's house to keep the lights on? Most people don't think of that.
And then the uh, emotional impact of having that all done. You're leaving your family well cared for, but from a perspective of the family, after a person passes away, all you want to do is be together and mourn. And so to have that time, uh, and not to have to worry, as you said, is really, and to know where everything is a gift. It really
It
is. And I know
it
that
is.
there's the nitty-gritty stuff and the emotional legacy, like messages to loved ones, as you said. And um, that's just as important, those messages to your loved ones. So, and I know that Soalma does some of that. So we're going to talk about Soalma in a moment. Um, but I'm wondering, for those people who haven't thought about end of life planning, this is new to
Yeah.
them. They might be hearing this for the first time, at least this nitty gritty part of it. What are some of those key pieces of information that we really need to be documented if we do a list just right here that people could refer back to?
Yeah. So, I'll try and be really brief on
Yeah.
this one. Not that many other things aren't important or that they don't need to be done, but I really want to place the emphasis on fewer things. So the first one is a will, right? Many people think, I don't really have a lot of wealth. I don't need one. Even if you don't own much, please research this topic. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice, but please speak to a lawyer. There are many online tools to help. There are even free workshops to give you more substantial advice. But I think a will, even a brief one, rough, but something that's going to be legally binding helps immensely. And then the second thing, and for me, in some ways, it's even more important, are medical directives. And this is so important to me because it is actually someone's life on the line, someone that you care deeply about, or it's your own life, right? And I see families destroyed by this topic because they can't align on what decisions to make for family members who can't make their own decisions.
Yep.
So I think for anyone thinking about legacy planning, step one, think about your own life. And at the most basic level, think about the decisions your loved ones might have to take. And Tracy, you might actually be able to articulate these prompts in a better way than I can. But do I want to be kept alive on a machine or not? Do I want a DNR, a do not resuscitate, and many other medical decisions? And once you have your wishes in mind, step two is kind of a two-parter. It's communicating those decisions, right? So making sure you're speaking to an expert to make sure those are legally binding, but also speaking to your family, the people that will have to make those decisions. So you communicate that and they don't feel, oh, I'm making the wrong decision when that time comes. And for me, I think it's about family, it's about being together, and that for me is probably the most important one.
I 100% agree with you when you say that the will and the things are one thing, but the medical decisions and families being torn apart, because things are things. Not that money isn't important, because it is important. But when you see your
Exactly.
loved ones suffering, it brings it to a whole different level. And a lot of times, family members aren't aligned with their
Exactly.
beliefs. They really aren't. Even I've said this story a lot of times. My oldest brother and I, we were talking to my parents about what they wanted. My parents had their will done, but they hadn't spoken or even talked about want from a medical standpoint. Um, and my oldest brother and I had a very different vision about what was okay and what wasn't. And so I told my parents, listen, we need to have this conversation because the things aren't going to break the family apart. But if I see you suffering and I'm not agreeing with the decision that my oldest brother is making,
Exactly.
that's going to pull us apart. Um, and one thing I can say to every single person who is looking at, because every single state has their own form, and you could go to you do Google search for for the advanced directive in your state, or you could go to the ARP website, and they have a great listing for all of them. But the conversation you should be having is about quality of life, not if you want to be put on a machine. It is quality of life. What do you want? And you make those lists. You make that list about what is important to you and what is that cutoff line where no, you don't want to go on because you can't have these things. And that's the conversation you need to be having with your loved ones because there's only so much that the three pieces of paper will talk about.
Exactly.
That's a conversation you need to be having with your loved ones.
And and to have it more than
Yeah.
once, right? Because people's views might change. What someone values in their 30s might change into their 40s, 50s, 60s, right? So having that and understanding the why also is important, right? Quality of life. I think many times people equate living is the same as not dying, but those are 2 very different things for me, right? And so really focusing on the distinction and what living means to you.
Yep. I've seen good deaths and I've seen bad deaths. And the good deaths are all about figuring out because death is one point in time, it's that last part of your life and it's about quality of life. And so the good deaths
Yeah,
have two things in common. One, they've thought about that last part of life and they've planned for what they want and they've had those quality of life discussions. And the second one is, yes, they've had those discussions. They've really, they based everything on quality of life.
absolutely.
So let's talk about Soma. And I'm so excited. First of all, before we go into the what it is, I'm curious about the name Soma because it is a very interesting name and it's spelled Soalma. So can we
Yep.
tell me about that?
Sure. So my co-founder is actually from Spain. And from day one, this was going to be an international solution to an international problem. And so we were clear we didn't want something that was obvious in any one language, right? So legacy is forever, legacy something, or the equivalent in Spanish. We wanted to invent something that really didn't mean anything in any given language but that was meaningful to us as a founding team. And so what you have here is kind of the combination of soul in English and alma in Spanish, which means soul, right?
Mm.
So in Spain, a lot of people will call it soalma. And then in the US, a lot of people will focus on solma, right? So they're focusing on the core language. Either one works for us, but that's really the origin of the name.
Interesting. I love that. Um, Tell us a little bit about actually what the platform is, who it's geared towards also.
Sure. So think of it as a secure digital vault. Not only that, but we're guiding you on what to put in that vault and help you keep it organized. So, on the practical side, we have prompts to guide the user on the right information, the documents, and we keep it very organized. On the emotional side, we're offering prompts, ideas, inspiration on what sort of content to create, whether that's a video, an audio file, some pictures, creating new content, or uploading existing content. And for both the practical and the emotional, we offer digital sharing features. So you, as a user, can define who that content is to be shared with your loved ones, whether it's now or even in the case of more sensitive information, you can share it after your passing. And for most people, some of the challenges are, I don't know what to do or I don't have the time to do it. And we are aiming to solve for both of those by guiding the user on what they need to do, but making sure they understand it's possible in a way that doesn't require a huge time commitment. And we have a lot of other ideas and features in the pipeline, but we are really excited with, helping people take that first step, which is really the challenge. And you were talking about who is it geared to. While anyone can use it, we've found there are certain life events or types of people that really gravitate towards this type of planning. So the first one where we were talking about the crowd that has recently retired or maybe approaching retirement, they're thinking about this topic both practically and emotionally. On the emotional side, we found people with grandchildren are really, really into the idea, right? Grandparents have a wealth of knowledge, so many stories, and they're so eager to share that with their family as a time capsule now or maybe stuff for the future. On the flip side, sometimes people with young children, new parents, or people with minors think of this topic as top of mind. If something happens to me, how do I make sure my child is taken care of? And so that's another driver. And then the middle ground is, let's call it adult children, and they're thinking, my parents are getting older. I'm going to have to deal with this one day. Mom and dad, let's do it. Right. So they're not planning for themselves. They're helping their parents plan. And those are the key three groups. But there's so many other drivers, right? When people buy property, they think of this a little bit more. If people have some sort of medical ailment, they think of this. If people get in an accident, they think this could be much worse. I think the 3 groups I mentioned earlier are the ones that are very proactive. There are so many other people who think about it, but just don't have the right audience or resources to articulate that and voice it to the outside world. So really anyone can use it, but those are the people that really can benefit hugely right now.
And I think, yeah, you walked me through it, and I've played around a little bit in it, and it's a great platform. I love that you sectioned it off really nicely, so it's almost these bits. I mean, this planning is overwhelming, but I can go in and I could go, okay, so I have, 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. I'm just gonna go over and work on this little part of it right here because it's sectioned off. You make it easy, boom, that part's done. Or the emotional aspect of it, the other part of it. And oh, I have a story I just thought of. Okay, I'm gonna videotape it really quickly, or I'm going to, yeah, and I'll upload it, or I'll take and write something about it and I'll post that, or I'll upload that into the platform, these stories. So it's not something that you sit down and do in a weekend. It is something that, the platform's right there whenever, instead of scrolling on Facebook, instead of doom scrolling, maybe you want to do something in here a little more positive and tell a story or do something like that.
Absolutely, and in the same way we're talking about doom scrolling that it's, very
Yeah.
addictive, someone who was using the practical side recently said, "I thought I'd just stop after, 20 minutes, but it was addictive, so I kept going," right? So, the simplicity that we're able to offer helps people get going, but the most important step is that first one, right? From 0 to 1, getting started is the key thing.
So let's talk about how this is accessible for people who aren't tech savvy. Thinking my mom on this. Okay.
My mom.
Yeah, I just signed my mom up for Signal. That was a process, let me tell you. We'll talk after. But but people who are not tech savvy, like really, like who are still saying,
Yeah,
"What's the address bar? What are you talking about?" Or, that
yeah,
level. How can this help? How does, Soma make it easy for them?
absolutely. So we've built this with seniors in mind, right? People that are younger can of course use it, but we've, built for that lowest level of tech literacy and we're testing with seniors all the time. We've somewhat arbitrarily said that my mom's tech level is the bare minimum required, and so everything goes through her. If she can't do it, we have to go back to the drawing board and simplify it. That being said, there are limits, right? If someone has never used a smartphone or a computer or doesn't have email, something like this might be a little much for them, but that shouldn't prevent them from planning. In fact, what we see in those scenarios is children or grandchildren can step in to ask questions, maybe set their account up, ask the questions, note down the answers, and really support them. So the guidance is there. The tech support maybe comes from the grandchildren in the case of people that really, really can't handle technology. And in the case of the emotional legacy, it can actually be a really good bonding experience with grandparents and grandchildren,
Mm.
right? In a world where everything's so tech driven and maybe they don't have common ground. Um, you know, people can prompt people to say, well, how did you meet grandpa or something like this, and it's really a bonding experience, even if the grandparents are tech savvy.
So this feels like, and what you just spoke about, it feels like something that could help create those meaningful conversations that could help with that. Have you heard from users who have used Soma as a way to open up those dialogues with loved ones?
Of course, and pulling from what I just said about the grandparents and the grandchildren collaborating for an emotional legacy, it's a great way to start that conversation. And especially with doing it the practical side through technology, not doing it face to face with someone that you care deeply about is easier. And I've spoken to people that said they were really surprised at how possible it was to speak with me about this topic, whereas if their children or grandchildren had been in front of them, they would have broken down.
Mm.
And a digital tool helps facilitate that transfer of content in a very convenient way. Um, it's also great where there's one side of the equation where that's a parent child relationship or a spouse relationship where one person doesn't want to approach this subject. So a digital tool allows the person that's being proactive to start this planning process and not be reliant on the other person. So it helps in facilitating the conversation, but also if someone's apprehensive about having a conversation, it doesn't limit someone from planning.
It's so interesting that you say that about the digital format and how that actually helps people with that. I'm curious, how long has Soma been a company? How long have you been up and running?
Yeah. Well, it feels like I've been doing it forever, but I guess in the larger scheme of things, it's been relatively new. As an entrepreneur, that you go on that roller coaster of from idea and concept to it being reality. So I started with this as a concept in my mind I think about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And my co-founder, and it's probably a similar time frame, there were ups, there were downs, there were both of us pausing independently. And then when we met, we spent a lot of time getting to know each other, really to make sure we are building a long-term, sustainable business with a solid base. And then reality is we launched last year.
I
So,
love
like I
that.
said, it feels like I've been doing it forever. But with this topic specifically, this is a marathon for us. This is not going to change overnight in society. And I'm so happy to have the team that we have, which is focused on the long term. We understand there are going to be so many challenges. It's a tough space. We don't expect it to be easy, but we're really excited for the ride.
I think it's a tough space because death is a tough sale, right? Illness and death, tough sale. I
Absolutely.
know. Like people hate the tax man and they really hate the death doula also, let me tell you. But two people you don't want to see. Um, but I also think that it's a tough field because of the changes in technology and how quickly that is going right now. So there's two things I want to talk about with regard is security. Let's talk about that because it's top of everyone's mind. How are you going to make sure everything
Absolutely.
is safe and people aren't, it doesn't go out into so everyone could see this. And the second uh, thing is how are you keeping up with technology like AI and all of those good things that are happening? So let's start with security.
Sure. So when we talk about what we do, security is the first question that comes up, right? And it's top of mind for us. I'll split this into two, right? Just as a general planning concept and then one for our company. So as a general planning concept, as a user, you have to do what makes sense for you. You have to do what you're comfortable with, something that aligns with your tech skills, what your family situation is. And that can be as simple as writing details or letters in a notebook, right? It could be creating a folder on your computer, but making sure that someone knows about it and can access it. It can be recording videos on your phone, or it can be using a tool like Solma for more streamlined user experience. The important thing is that you're doing something. So if someone's very skeptical, sometimes maybe an older crowd is a little skeptical, do what you're comfortable with. If that means writing in a notebook, do that. Moving on to us as a company, again, it's the number one question, and so we have a dedicated page to security on our website that talks about our security initiatives, things like two-factor authentication, how things are fully encrypted, how we're doing, audits and reviews from third parties to make sure things are secure. We're using third-party platforms that are, top in their sectors, so we're not reinventing the wheel. So you can read a lot about that on our website. And as we work with businesses, because that is our strategy right now, we welcome their security or compliance teams to chat with ours and really ask any and every question to make sure it matches their levels of security. It's really, really top of mind for us. Um, and then the second part of your question, which now I'm drawing a
New
blank on.
technology, AI, and that's my personal thing.
Yes,
I'm sure that most of the people listening to this really don't, think about AI or care much about it. Maybe not, but I do. I'm in the Silicon Valley,
exactly.
right?
So that's actually interesting because I think earlier in this run, so maybe about 3, maybe even 4 years ago, as I was, doing some market research with lots of people on this concept, I had that question, right? I said, "But in 5 and 10 years, technology is gonna be different, and what if this is not relevant?" And I was convincing myself that this would not work. And someone said, "You're overthinking it. You are focusing on building a successful company now with the technology that exists now. And over time, you will adapt and incorporate the new technology. So you're not trying to build today with technology that's going to happen in 10 years ago. You are going to make sure that your company is nimble and flexible to incorporate all of those new things and not be resistant to change." And that's exactly what we're doing right now. So what you see on our website right now is just the tip of the iceberg. We have so many different ideas that incorporate new technology, things like AI, which are on the forefront of everyone's mind. And how can we incorporate this, but still be true to our values, right? Security, privacy, supporting the user. So we want to make sure that we are finding a balance between incorporating all of the new technology and supporting our users constantly.
Thank you. So you talked about working with different businesses, different companies. When you say that, who are you talking about? Because this just isn't a consumer, a business to consumer. It's also business to business company.
Exactly. So, as I'm sure you're aware, convincing someone to think of this topic is
Yep.
impossible. I'm not going to say hard, it's
Yes.
impossible. I can't go up to someone on the street and say, "Hey, have you thought about legacy planning?" If they're not ready, it's not happening. And so we want to be available to these people when they are ready. And readiness can be signaled by a number of different factors or actions, right? Has someone created a will? Have they purchased life insurance? Are they moving to a retirement community? All these and many more signal readiness to plan a little bit more, right? So these are the people, like I said in the beginning, they're not avoiding the topic, they're open to it. They just need some support to expand their planning, right? So we're speaking to estate lawyers, financial advisors, life insurance, and other types of insurance as well, retirement communities, high risk professions like police and fire, hospice, and then other sorts of organizations that talk about, medical
Yeah.
things, right? So we'd love to start conversations with an Alzheimer's society or cancer society, things that, have networks thinking about this topic a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Those are good groups of people to do this with. So wonderful.
And of course, death doulas such as
Oh
your network here.
yeah.
The most important.
Well, thank you. And hopefully, as I said, hopefully we get to people, and I'm really fortunate that I've had a really good group of people that have come to me who are at that planning stage and aren't sick and they're just thinking about this. And so I've been really, really lucky to work with people. Um, so what is if someone wants to start, what is one piece of information that you think that everyone should document today? Something that people might not even realize is important.
Oh, this one's tough. I mean, we did speak about the will
Yep.
and the medical directives. Um, I think those are the two fundamental ones that I would think of. On our platform, we have a list of many other, important components, and you can access that for free as well. Um, I guess in a way, I might respond to your question without answering it, right? I think the most important thing here is not one document or one piece of information. We've talked about that, right? But moving back to the reason why the medical directives are so important, it's the human side behind it. And I think when you're thinking about this sort of stuff, the most important thing is living life to the fullest, right? And telling the people that you love them, spending time with them, calling them. I think so many times people, no matter how much planning they do, they might get to a certain point and have regrets, and that's not what you want. And so remember, this is your life to live to the fullest, and to do that, right? So it's not one piece of information or one document. We talked about that, but just, hug the people you love and live life to the fullest.
Very well said. Very well said. Farah, thank you so much for being on the show today and for the work that you're doing with your business partner to help people really plan with care. Before we wrap up, can you share how folks can learn more about Soalma?
Absolutely. So, go to our website, right? So it's soalma.com. I assume you'll put the links to our website and social media. So there is a free plan to sign up and get started right away. No need to put in a credit card at all. And once you've started that planning process, the first step is the hardest. There are other plans that have more advanced features, and if you're not ready yet, then follow us on social media. We're always doing prompting people with ideas, inspiration. And for us, the important thing is that people are planning. Um, if it's with us, great. We are happy to help you. But if it's with a pen and paper, if it's a binder, the important thing is doing something.
Listeners, I know these conversations aren't easy, but they're so necessary. Planning ahead doesn't take the grief away, but it can give our loved ones the space to actually feel it, to come together, and to move through it without the chaos and confusion that so often follows a death. Just taking one small step, writing something down, or having a conversation can be an incredible act of love. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.